Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first interview of High AR Week that we're doing here at OC University. In case you guys are new or don't know what this is all about, OC University is this improvement-focused OSU hub where our goal is basically to bridge that gap between top players and the general community. So in keeping with that theme, something we do here is these series of interview weeks where we dedicate 1 week of interviews to a specific topic. This is the third interview series that we're doing, and first interview of that third series, which is all on the topic of high AR. So yes, with me today is none other than Matrix, the debut of high AR week. I'm very excited to have you here. Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm very glad to be here.
Okay, so just to give a brief introduction for those who aren't familiar with you, could you give sort of an introduction as to who you are and what people probably know you as?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I am Matrix. Most of you probably know me from when I was a player. I have a couple of maps in the game, maybe various other things like my left-hand practice, but mostly I'm known for AR11 scores. The most notable one would be Hapil, the one Korean map that I definitely cannot pronounce, and I'm not going to try to
Oh,
pronounce.
yes,
Yeah,
that's a classic.
I skipped like 200 pp with that, like a gap of 200 pp from like 390 to 600, and yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I'm most
yeah.
known for. Mostly play Air 11, and
That
yeah,
was your
I
like
guess
debut score, I feel like.
yeah,
I
kind of in a way.
I feel like yeah. That's how I think of it at least. Um, okay, personally, my Matrix score bias is probably Moon. That score is beast, so beast mode. I think
Thanks.
that yeah, I have some history with that map. I just yeah, I've had it for a long time. So yeah, very respectable score. But anyway, hi AR. So yes, I think you're definitely very known for being a very competitive AR11 score setter for a long time. And I guess we can start with how you sort of got into that.
Yeah, so when I really early into the game, I used to play a lot of multiplayer, and I met this like group of people who had this like collab on their profile from I believe a game series called Waranahara. Uh, I may have said that name wrong. I never played the game myself, but anyway, they had this like collab on their profiles, and I got to know a lot of the people in that collab, and there was like this whole skill thing in it where on the banner for each particular player, it would say their specialty, how good they were at that said specialty, and I thought that was kind of cool. The people I met in there were really cool. Among those people, there was this guy named Flasho Fosho, and we were probably 5 digits at the time. He really liked playing really hard stuff. A lot of it was hard rock double time. I took a liking to a lot of that stuff too, and I wanted to compete with him a lot. So we kind of spent a lot of time just playing no fail double time hard rock on really random maps, even up to like 10 stars. We'd get like 50%. We didn't really
Oh my
care.
god.
We were just like, hey, let's do this. I'll beat your fucking 50% score on it. Oh, sorry, is there profanity allowed here?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, all right. But yeah, we just compete over absolute nonsense, and yeah, that's initially how I got into Air 11.
um, that okay. I had no idea actually that Avatar collab because I recognize it. Wait, wasn't Wairu in that also? Do you know
Who? Sorry.
Wairu, like W?
Oh yeah, Wairu was in it. Yeah, he was the second member, I believe.
That's crazy. So it was like a cult gang. So were you basically like you wanted to join it, but you didn't have a specialty in mind, and then you just decided to run with Flash of Fosha as your sort of inspiration?
Back then, I mean, even before I joined that like collab, I was just I really liked playing really fast maps. That was just always something I liked. I looked up to speed players like Mythu at the time, Gaze McGee, Septon, people like
Oh,
that.
right. Oh,
And yeah,
Septon
I
throwback.
just wanted to be fast. I remember it's really specific, but there's this map called Unpleasant Sonata, and to like get entry into this collab, there was like this score limit that you had to beat on that map. We'd play the Pagli Sonata difficulty, which was like 330 BPM streams,
Oh my
no fail
god.
double time, and you'd have to beat like I think 286,000 score, really low bar because no one was even trying that kind of crap at the time. But yeah, if you beat that score, you were allowed entry into this collab.
That's
And
so
yeah, I was like,
funny.
okay, I'm beating it, and yeah, got in.
That's crazy. So how I guess experienced were you as a player when all this sort of happened?
Back then, not that experienced. I was probably like 15K at the time, maybe even 20K possibly. It was very early into the game for me, somewhere around 2016, and
Okay.
I don't know what PP that would have been at the time. I'd say maybe around 4,000.
Yeah. Definitely if I had to guess, that's probably 60, 70K ish. Don't take my word for that, but definitely a lot lower than it was back in 2016. But I think probably what a lot of people are looking for is like, how good do I have to be to start learning higher ARs? Like, because I think people tend to put like artificial skill limits, like, oh, you need to be at least like 4 digit before you start touching like certain aspects of the game. So, yeah, I don't know. What's your take on that, I guess?
Right. Okay. So, how am I going to answer this? I feel like any time is kind of a good idea to practice high AR, but it may not be the most optimal time. One thing I feel like I kind of want to sit down here is I do believe that you cannot screw up your reading just by playing high AR. You can get very used to it, but if you actually dedicate the time to low AR, you'll just you'll get better at chunking and learn how to read stuff. You're not going to screw up your high AR or your low AR ability or potential for low AR just by playing high AR early on.
Right.
I don't think that's a concern at all. But yeah, I feel like your mechanics should be rather good if you want to optimally start practicing higher AR. I use the word optimally kind of loosely here because I can't tell you what the optimal is. But when I say that, let's just assume I'm saying something close to a really good place, maybe.
Okay, so as in basically like what you need to have your basics down pretty much.
I
I think
think more than basics, but it's see, it's very hard for me to put an actual place on where I
right,
think is
right.
best for it. I do feel like um,
I think that in itself is probably a satisfactory answer, I would say,
okay.
because um, just the fact that there really is no hard limit is hopefully can clear up some misunderstandings that exist in the community. Like, oh, you need to be X rank, you need to have at least X like 6 star FC before you start learning high or something like that. And
I think I have
actually,
something I do want to add to
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah, go.
But okay, so um, th- well, I don't think that there is a super important place to where you or a place that it's detrimental to start it at. As I said, I do believe that there is a better place, and I think that better place is probably where you are able to get valuable feedback from playing it, which is like, maybe you can play Air or OD10 quite well. And when you're playing it, every time you get positive feedback when you're playing Air 11, that's good for your brain, right? You did something
Oh,
right, and you remember that, and
right,
you might get more likely to do it again. So you have to be in like this situation to where you're pretty capable of getting like uh, it's kind of arbitrary, but 300s because it's like that's feedback to
right.
if you get 300s on OD11, that's like okay, you did that right, and that's rememberable to you. But if you are not in a state to where you can even do that like at all, it's going to be very hard to start deducing like the right way to play it.
Right. Okay. I think you're familiar with the term comprehensible input, right?
Oh yeah, of course, with language learning, I've
Right.
heard
Right.
that thousands of
So
times.
yeah, that seems like a pretty similar idea to what you're sort of saying here, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And could you, like, to those who aren't completely familiar, could you define what comprehensible input is?
Yeah, so in language learning, comprehensible input is known as this thing where it's like you're listening to the content that you're mostly immersing with, and by immersing I mean surrounding yourself with the language. You're immersing yourself in this content that is not like the top of the line hardest content ever, but it's like somewhat close to your level to where you're hearing a bunch of things that you know, and maybe a little bit of things that you don't know, but you're kind of capable of like maybe deducing what those things mean just based on some logical guesses or deductions.
Right. It's like, for example, uh, the audio says a word that you don't know in the other language, but then it shows a picture of that word also. So you start associating the sound that you hear with the picture, and so you can sort of figure out what like the word means. So it's somewhat comprehensible, basically.
Yeah, like
So
I+1 sentences where it's like
right, right,
you see sentences and you know everything in it except one thing. It's very easy. Okay, not it's not always very easy, but oftentimes it is quite easy to guess what that is through context, right? You know, you get
right,
everything, but just and you don't get that, but you can, you know, you kind of get that through context.
right. So I think ultimately, actually, so we can also establish like what is not comprehensible input. Like if you're watching, like let's say you're trying to learn Japanese, and you just like watch anime without subtitles, but you know zero Japanese. Um, it's probably not comprehensible. You might already know like a word or two from your past experience, but for the most part, you probably aren't picking up anything new because it's way too hard for you, right? Like you need to work your way up. Um,
Yeah.
Probably something,
It's
yeah,
essentially like when you know a little bit of things and you constantly hear it, you're reinforcing what you already know. But if
right,
you're hearing a bunch of stuff that you don't know, you're not reinforcing anything. It's kind of just going in one ear and out the other. You're not, you know, solidifying it in some sense.
right.
It's nothing's happening to that.
It is incomprehensible,
Yeah.
basically. And so I think that's probably the defining mark of like learning a certain. Honestly, high AR for one, but really any new skill. Like basically, so let's just talk AR 11 for example. AR 11, if you want to get into it, you need to get to the point where playing AR 11 is comprehensible input, basically. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Very
so
important.
okay, anything you want to add to that, or
Yeah, finally I'd still like to say um when the something that can make it a little bit more comprehensible is when the OD is a lot lower. Um, I see. I don't think I. It's kind of like because OD and AR are very separated, but OD11 kind of makes it really hard to access AR11. A lot of people I've heard this said before. Some people say this. It's AR11 is gated behind OD11, and sometimes I hear that the other way around, where OD11 is gated behind AR11 because you
oh
can't
right,
really practice OD11 without playing AR11,
right,
and you can't really practice. Well, you can, but there's not as many situations where you can practice AR11 without OD11.
right, right,
So yeah, it's you can if we're like what I'm trying to go here with this is if you kind of isolate AR11 in some kind of sense, you can practice higher AR way sooner because you're not thinking about OD11.
right.
But I feel like for this it's more important to not separate the two because OD11 is like a very fundamental part of um,
Like hard rock double time,
AR11.
right,
Yeah, because it's like that's just basically 99% of maps that are AR11. You're going to be playing OD11.
right. I do get a couple people asking me like if I'm trying to learn higher AR, is it worth it to go to McOsu or Osu Laser or like just change the stats of the map so that I can isolate AR like the higher AR without needing to worry about the circle size decrease or the OD increase.
But yeah, see, this allows you to like going back to comprehensible input. This allows you to tweak the input to be more comprehensible to you. You
Right,
know, so you can kind of find this fine line where it's like, yeah, this is a little bit harder. This is a little bit past my peak, and that's really good. You're not forced to like play something way faster than your peak if you're just going on double time. You can't play Freedom Dive at 330 BPM, right? You can maybe if you can already play at 220, then the next step is probably to go to 230, and you can use
right.
McOsu to do that.
Yeah, I think like gradual steps up. I think that the way I usually like to explain this is like, it for let's say you're trying to be able to lift heavier weights, and for sake of example, the heaviest you can lift is like 50 kilos and slash like 50 pounds, whatever, 50 measures of units, and then you're like, okay, I want to get stronger, so I'm just gonna try picking up this 200 like pound or 200 kilo weight until I can pick it up. Um, it's not really how it works. You're not really gonna get very far, I feel like. So, um,
I think this is like kind of like a little bit out there, because I don't think you actually need comprehensible input for weightlifting. Technically, you might be able to just try and lift that up all the time, and you'd still be, fatiguing the hell out of yourself. You're not literally lifting it, but you will be absolutely strengthening your muscles if you just ignore that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's a
I
bit out there, but
I will try my best to not disagree with you. I mean that I have no way to disprove that, so we'll
well,
leave
yeah,
it at
because it's
that.
like you can get your arms strong just by tensing them, right? You can just tense it. You're not using any weight. You're just, trying to put strength in it. It's easier when you have weights. You're not going to
Right.
become a bodybuilder, obviously, just by tensing your arm. But what I'm saying is, by trying to lift something too difficult for you to lift, you're still exercising. It's
Right.
just not that efficient.
Right.
I obviously I'm not a bodybuilder or a weightlifter. I'm just saying that like you might be if you're crazy enough, you might be able to get some kind of practice out of that.
Right. That I think a general consensus though is that it's not the most optimal way to go
Oh
about
no,
it.
absolutely. I don't
Right.
think that's optimal at all. I
Like
would never suggest that at all.
it is. I think it's
I'm just relating this because earlier, as I said, there is an optimal place to start playing AR11.
right.
My so-called optimal, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to start there.
Right.
You can
Yeah.
start it. You can start it anywhere, where and you'll still get something out of it. It just won't be the most comprehensible for you. So yeah,
Yeah.
what I'm basically trying to convey with that sense of logic is just like there is varying levels of comprehensible input, and where you kind of choose to go for that is entirely up to you. Um, if it's more fun for you, for example, to try and lift a weight that you absolutely cannot,
Right.
lift, and that might be better for you if it's boring for you to like actually be closer to your limit.
That is fair. I mean, yeah, you can definitely get somewhere, but I think it is only more optimal than like doing nothing. I feel like,
Oh
there's
yeah, of course.
right. Um, but yes, okay. Was there like a general question topic that we were trailing off of, or I think we've mostly.
I think it stemmed from the right time to start AR11 at,
Oh,
which is
right.
kind of like all over the place. And yeah,
Yeah. Um. Okay.
in short, wherever you're kind of comfortable with, there is a better place to do it. But if it's more fun for you to just go all in, you're still gonna get more out of that than doing nothing.
Right. Actually, okay. So to be fair, I think up until now we've mostly been talking about AR11 in particular, being so OD gated as well. But I think, in my opinion, the same thing sort of exists when trying to get into hard rock itself. AR10. Um, is that something you would kind of agree with as well? Like
Um,
on a lesser scale, it's somewhat tricky to find maps to play AR10 and get better at hard rock, without it also being OD10.
yeah, I mean, I guess I can. On a much lower level, this can definitely exist. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for okay, so do you think the same concept applies to someone who struggles to read AR10, for example, like trying to break that barrier and be able to play hard rock?
Yeah, I think it's mostly similar.
Okay. Okay. Um yeah, I think yeah, so general consensus so far, starting point is really up to not necessarily like, your rank or like your highest PP player or anything like that. It's a lot closer to um yeah, like what you are comfortable with already, where your skill level is, and yeah, I guess whether or not those high AR maps are comprehensible to you, like just barely challenging yourself is I think really key. Um, yes, okay. I do want to also touch on mods, or not mods, skins. Yeah, skins. I want to touch on skins, and I guess what. Okay, so what exactly do you think is the connection between skins and high AR reading?
Okay, so I absolutely think that brighter colors are just better, way better. I, it's way easier to see in your peripheral vision, especially. they can be kind of annoying, which is it makes things when things pop out more in the side of your peripheral vision, things will appear more cluttered, and that is definitely a concern when it comes to stuff like lower AR. On higher AR, I've never really thought that to be very much of the case because the density is probably like 4 notes, 3 note or 3 notes sometimes at once. It's never really that high, so I've never thought of that density issue where all like you see a bunch of bright colors in the side of your peripheral vision to be super annoying.
Right.
But I also don't think you should just go out and pick the brightest color of green because that's just kind of painful on your eyes. I don't think you have to go too bright, but I do think a solid brightish color is probably one of the best that you can use.
I think for so before we started the session or the actual recording, we were talking about like you said combo colors are actually pretty important. Rather than just having like the same color on everything.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little?
I guess when it comes to breaking down patterns mentally, this kind of applies more to lower AR than it does higher AR. It's kind of like it's very hard to. I mean, let's say a mapper combo colored a square a certain way. Like it's just let's say there's 4 notes. It's just a square. It's
Right.
all red, and then right after that there might be another square or a triangle even, and that has different combo colors. If your skin is all the same colors, it is a lot harder for you to kind of segregate each pattern in your brain. And see them differently. It kind of just looks like a giant clutter of notes. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. You can
Right.
still be very good at breaking down patterns in your head. But when it comes to OSU, a lot of players are not very conscious of how they're focusing on the game. And a lot of the time, the way they learn to focus on the game is induced by their environment. It could have been, a skin that they used very early on that makes it a lot easier to see patterns that way. And then they just continue doing it throughout their entire time of playing the game. It doesn't take very long to conceive a method of reading when you're first starting the game, but it can take a very, very long time to kind of overwrite that and start looking at it differently. So I
Right.
think when you start like when you learn to read a certain skin a certain way, it's going to apply to all the rest of the skins. And I guess that's going off on a tangent a little bit, but say it's like I think that the first skin you use can even be kind of detrimental to something that you're doing 5 years later in the game because it may have screwed up your reading in some way, which you can fix. You can
Right.
consciously focus on that and overwrite it. But again, most players are not conscious of that. It's it's
Right.
kind of like it just forces them to read certain patterns in certain ways, and that's detrimental.
I think sort of to summarize in case we lost some people. I think it's all about like the difference between learning something right the first time versus like learning it wrong and then trying to fix a bad habit, something like that.
Yeah,
Is sort of what you were talking about.
yeah.
Right.
I don't know if that strayed away a little bit from the question you
No, no,
asked.
no.
I'm just saying that like
I think that's fair.
okay, yeah,
So yeah, we've talked about we've mentioned chunking I think a couple times in um this interview. I do want to mention that in our interview series on mind block, we talked pretty much like half the time was talking about chunking. So if you're not familiar with that topic, I would suggest checking those interviews out, either on our YouTube channel or on our Spotify. But yes, chunking basically to summarize. Actually, Matrix, do you want to give your own sort of brief definition of what chunking is?
yeah. Okay, so I feel like the best way that I can explain this is just kind of explain what's going on in the mind of a player when he's playing a map. Let's say you see a square and you're just looking at it on your screen. You can choose to view this in like 3 different ways, technically 4, but that's a little bit. The fourth one is kind of hard. Um, but the fourth one would be seeing each object as its own entity, and you're not associating it with literally anything else. But that's just the human brain is.
Right.
Uh, yeah, good
Like
luck.
basically like looking at each individual circle, right?
Yeah, and like you just have no mind of the next object until it's your time to move to that object. That's very hard. But to describe chunking, it's like let's say you can view that square as 1 2 1 2. Like you just see two straight lines. You complete the first line and then you complete the second line, or you can
Right.
choose to view it as 1 2 3 1. You see kind of like this right triangle, and then just a singular note after it.
Right.
Um, so yeah, you're basically picking your own ways to read particular patterns And a lot of the times when you're mind blocking, it's kind of a bit off topic, it's because you're viewing the pattern in some way that you're not very good at viewing it, and you just screw it up completely.
I do want to ask, sort of in particular for this interview, like how chunking applies to high AR in particular.
Um, I don't want to say it's not. It's completely uh, unpresent, but like I don't think it's super important unless the BPM is high because that's when the density increases. Usually, you're just seeing like not that many objects on the screen at once, so chunking is not all that important.
Right.
I don't I like honestly I'm not a very strong low AR reading player myself. I feel like I screw up things that 5 digits would have a very easy time on just because I haven't put that much time into low AR. It's never a big interest of mine.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I don't believe breaking down patterns mentally is all that important on AR11. I do think it exists. I
Right.
just don't think you need a very high level of it.
Um, in that sense, actually, there was a question from the forum, anonymous question that asked, "Do you think playing low AR maps will, in time, increase your overall reading for high AR?" So, like, is there any value out of learning easy mod, for example, or like very low AR, in getting better at high AR?
Um, I think to a very, very minimal extent, it might be like here's the thing. I've seen studies that show that practicing things in varying different ways will improve your overall response to that stimulus. So in some sense, practicing OSU in some very, very peculiar way may benefit your response to some other stimulus within that game. But I do think that it would be kind of minimal. Like I don't think easy is going to make you, a high or god. It might be, like a 0.001% difference that's very, very not perceptible at all.
Right. I think sort of the association is that like learning easy mod and low AR sort of refine your fundamentals, like fundamental reading ability, and then that fundamental reading ability can help you a little bit with getting a little faster at reading to some extent. But I think bottom line is that it's not as as good of a use of time as just other things that you can do to practice high AR, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
And speaking of other things you can do, I want to ask sort of like this is more about like brute force. Like how much would you associate high AR with like memorization, both like as when you're starting out trying to get better at a certain AR, and also like once you sort of do become more comfortable at AR11, like do you ever reach a point? I guess okay. So two questions basically. How important is memorization in learning a new high AR, and um, like is like do you ever sort of reach the point where you're able to read it comfortably?
Uh, hmm. This I feel like I'm going to go off on a lot here to answer this question.
Okay,
I feel like
that's
there's a
fine.
lot that kind of needs to be covered.
Yeah, go for it.
So something I would like to establish first of all is the way we view singles versus streams is very very different. Like when we see a single, we just move to it and we perform one motion to click it.
Right, and
There's
you're
like
referring to
our
single tap, right? There's like a single
yeah,
note. Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
just a single note, just a single note. You see one note, you move to it, and you click it. That's I feel like a lot of high R players have said this before, where it's like when you're playing a high R map and it's just an A map, it's a lot easier for them because there's no 1/4, there's no streams in the map to click. And I guess I want to ask this: do we both agree here that 1/4 streams are much harder on AR11 than it is to just play complete singles and sliders and whatnot?
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, so basically, my theory for why this is the case is when we see the first object of a stream, we we initiate or rather we prepare to click it like it's a single. But then let's say we're on 200 BPM. That means that like an object is showing up for I believe it's like every 77 milliseconds. So that means we're not going to know that this is a stream until another 77 milliseconds pass. And subtract that from 300 milliseconds, which is AR11.
Right.
That's like my brain right now 223 milliseconds. So you're not actually playing 300 milliseconds. You're not reacting to 300 milliseconds anymore because your reaction is resetting in a way. You have to The moment you see that second object in the stream, you're like, okay, this is a stream. I have to play it like a stream. So now you're reacting to it as a stream. You initiate your single tap, no, your streaming way of tapping instead of your single tap. So yeah, you're not reacting to 300 milliseconds. You're reacting to 220, or if you're playing 270 BPM, then you're seeing it out every I think it's 55, 56 milliseconds, and in that case, now you're reacting to 240, 244 milliseconds.
Right. I think what's sort of happening is like you basically only see one object at a time, or like you don't have time to like see the entire pattern before you know what the pattern is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like when a stream comes, you okay, so like the AR is so fast that like you need to, like, once you see a note, you sort of have to just play it, right? So like you see the first note of the stream and you're like, okay, it's one note. I'm gonna go tap that one note. And then as you're going to tap that one note, another note comes, and then you're like, oh shit, there's 1/4 rhythm. And you sometimes don't really have a lot of time to like shift like your method of playing that. Because at first you're like, okay, I'm gonna play one note, and then you have to switch to, oh, I have to play stream, like, or I have to play triple, or like I have to use my other finger, or something like that. Is that basically right?
Yeah, it's basically put, our brain differentiates completely between singles and streams, and because we cannot know it's a stream until the next object shows up, we have to lose that time. We're losing that precious reaction time there, which is very unfortunate. I've had some ideas to evade that, which would probably make higher very easy. I'm in the process of practicing some of them, but
Oh,
see where those go.
is that
You can comment on those if
anything
you
you can
want to.
share? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the two most important ones, or the two most plausible ones to me, um, the first one is not possible on ranked maps, and it involves having the very first object of a stream be a certain color. So you see that color and you're like, okay, this is a stream. You know which technique you have to use. That would involve
Oh,
training, of course. You train yourself to learn that, and yeah, then you would have no issue. You wouldn't lose that 77 milliseconds or 55, depending on whatever BPM you're playing, because yeah, higher BPM notes closer together. Um, yeah, you
Al-
would not lose that.
to be fair, okay, this is oh, okay, so to be fair, that there's an increase in reaction time versus like when it's just like react to stimulus versus like you're adding an extra step of like distinguishing between the two types of stimulus still. Like there's some layer of processing. Like, is this, like, let's say you take the first note of each stream and you made it red, for example, and then there's this extra step of like checking your brain checking whether or not a circle is red. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
That's more an argument towards like that, like, niche method that you're trying to describe. But yeah, anyway, you can move on.
yeah. It just essentially tells you, okay, this is a stream, and it'll save you that time, which is awesome. And the second one that I'm working on, this is something that as you know, I'm practicing my left hand, trying to relearn the game for
Right.
a second time. Uh, because I'm doing this, it's a lot easier for me to focus on things that I couldn't focus on the first time, and that are very hard to change once you've already drilled a technique into your hands. What I'm trying to do is absolutely make it so I treat the first object of a stream like a single, and it's kind of like you have like this buffer after in your head where it's like, okay, if another object appears right after this, I'm going to remember that it's a stream, but I'm not going to treat it as a stream until I complete this first node. And I feel like this involves using your single tap technique on the first node of a stream. You have to start streams on the finger you single tap with to actually
Oh,
do this. I think that this is very, very complicated, and getting your brain to actually focus on it like that is very, very hard. I feel like it's very hard for me to confirm if I actually am having success with this, because I don't have the capability to play OD11 very well yet on my right hand. The tapping is not that great. But yeah, I feel like I could be onto something with trying to focus on reading the game that way, just treating the first object as a complete single, and keeping it as like a buffer in the back of my head to treat it like a stream only after I've executed that first note of that stream as a single. If that
that
makes
is
sense.
interesting. Yeah. So then, would you still switch to your other finger for like the next note?
Yeah, I wouldn't single tap the next note. I
Okay.
basically you can do this perfectly fine. You just have to single tap You have to start streams on the same finger which you single tap with.
Okay.
Now this does not mean that all players who start streams on the same finger that they single tap with are reading them like this. In fact, they're still probably not. They still probably start streams slightly differently, even though they're using the same finger to start the stream with, because again, it's just natural for your brain to separate singles and streams from each other. That's
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
how it works. You have to, I believe, to actually distinguish the two, you have to put conscious effort into that. I don't think someone's going to, luckily come to that. I don't think anyone will luckily come to that.
Right. I think okay, so with that sort of foundational understanding in mind that basically there's like different approaches that we take towards playing a single note or a 1-2 rhythm and 1-4 rhythm, right? Um
Right.
so any other elements that sort of go into, memorization slash reading of AR11?
Oh yeah. So the reason I brought that up was because the rhythm is mostly what people are memorizing when they're playing higher aim. A lot of the times they'll find that they can still aim the map quite well if their mechanics are very high, because 300 milliseconds to them is not nearly as hard as they probably think it is. They're just kind of thinking it's hard because they can't do the streams very well. But they can absolutely. Most players with high mechanics, people who are like top players, they can easily react to 300 milliseconds. So the thing that people memorize when they're memorizing maps on AR11 is primarily the rhythm. Um, there are a lot of different ways to get better at memorizing rhythms. Like if you're a mapper, you'll understand rhythms a lot better in maps. If you know the song and its repetitivity, like the rhythms, you might get better
Right.
at kind of memorizing the rhythms in the map quickly. I feel like I didn't rely on memorization, but I feel like through a lot of various different things, like my mapping experience and my knowledge of what rhythms will look like in some of those older maps and stuff like that, it became very easy to like just learn the rhythms and get used to maps in some sense. I feel like you probably know what I mean by that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You play a map a couple times, you get a lot better at it because you've memorized certain things about it. So I get used to some of the rhythms in the map, and yeah, some people they might spend a bunch of time drilling it into their muscle memory by like spamming it a bunch, and they just get used to playing these rhythms. Others they may have good intuition for what that rhythm will be like, and all of these skills are useful for high AR. Uh, but they're not. Are they required? No, I don't think they're required. I do believe that you can get to a point in time where you are able to read AR11 perfectly fine. You're not going to need to memorize maps at all. Um, but as I said, right now I kind of think that perfectly responding to say 220 milliseconds all the time, which is sorry, no, yeah, 220 milliseconds, which is like 200 BPM. When it comes to 1/4 rhythms, is it's pretty doable. I don't think there's that many people that are actually all that great at it. Most people who are playing AR11 do memorize to some extent. Not all of them. There's absolutely a couple people who have kind of surpassed this. Uh, I'm like going so many places. My brain
No,
is
no,
like
you're good.
jumping
You're
everywhere.
good.
Yeah, it's brain. Where are we going? Where are we going?
um, as like, is memorization really something that you need to do, or like, can
Yeah,
you?
okay. No, you do not need to do it. You will, if you want to learn AR11 and you put the time in and you practice responding to that higher AR stimulus all the time, even if you are not trying to do that stuff I was talking about to like bypass that 70 millisecond, or the variance of time that you're losing based on VPM, you can still learn to play high AR without that. I just think it'd make it a lot easier. But yeah, you are absolutely capable of playing AR11 without memorization. Um, Anyone is. I don't really think reaction timing is super genetic. Some people may think so. I think if it is, it's probably very low, within like
Right.
10 milliseconds variance or less.
I do want to ask. I think. Okay, so do you think that like you can get comfortable on AR11 by like only ever playing up to AR11? Like, do you think going up to like AR12, for example, and like practice clients, Mikosu, something like that, is there value in that? Like, is it really necessary in order to be able to read AR11 comfortably?
Necessary? No. Does it help? Probably. I practiced 11.3 to 11.5 sometimes on Mikosu. Um, most of my AR11 scores were done before I actually started practicing AR that high. Um, but yeah, again, it's AR up to even 11.5 is pretty doable because the aim is still not harder than um, 220 milliseconds or whatever. It's mostly the rhythm that gets even harder, because you're still losing that due to that reading flaw I had mentioned. By the time you're on 11.5, you probably need, if you're reacting to the rhythm, you're probably down to like 140 milliseconds, and that's very very hard to react to.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's very good to practice on even higher than AR11. But most people, mm, I feel like if you can't already play like 10.87 comfortably, I don't think there's all that much merit in going higher than 11. Um, because I feel like it'd come down to that comprehensible input thing we were talking about earlier.
Right.
I don't think you'd get all that much out of it. Maybe you would. I mean, you'll get something. It just won't be as efficient.
I want to ask about like sort of okay, your concept of like your brain sort of adapting to the speed of a certain stimulus as you just expose yourself to it more and more. Um, is that something you can sort of elaborate on,
Um,
if you know what I
well,
mean?
see, I'm not like a neuroscientist really. This is just,
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. But like,
I guess it's,
your OSU player intuition, you're an AR11ist.
yeah, it's just the more I've found myself practicing something, the more I've found that I've gotten much better and much faster at responding to it. And something this is kind of an analogy of sorts that I like. I got my license maybe like it was maybe around 6 months ago. I haven't been driving nearly as long as some of these people, and sometimes when I'm at a light, I kind of like to race the other person in a sense. Not like I'm not like speeding. I'm
Right.
racing them to see who can react to that light the fastest.
I do that
And
too.
there's
I do that
these
too.
there's these people who are fucking like probably 70 years old, and they kick my fucking ass because they have 50 years of experience behind their ass, reacting to that fucking light. And I'm like, holy shit, dude, you're 70 years old and you can react to the shit faster than me. Like you're literally insane, dude. You should play Osu. I swear. But yeah, I like to think of it like that because it's like they've seen it so much. They've gotten so good at reacting to it. And I
Right.
feel like that's the same with Osu. The more you react to a certain stimulus, you just get much better at responding to it.
Right. I think a similar thing happens with when you switch to a new skin, which I can sort of give my own experience. The skin that I currently use, when I first switched to it, I could not read. It felt I don't know, something about it was like felt good or comfortable to use, but I just wasn't used to it, and I couldn't read higher AR very comfortably. So I would switch to my old skin to learn a new map with high AR, and then I would go back to the other skin. I'm pretty sure, but like over time now, I'm a lot more used to how that skin looks, and um, yeah, hopefully that sort of is along the same vein
Yeah, yeah,
of what you're
I
saying.
think that's exactly the same. It's you're just way better at responding to the other circles. You're way more used to seeing them.
Right.
Um, I know that the question is eventually coming. Where is hidden? Is it easier to read higher AR on hidden than it is no mod? And my answer to that is absolutely no. It's just that most of the people who are top players have spent, people who have the mechanics to play high AR. They spent most of their time, 99% of their time, 90%, sorry, playing hidden. So they're way better at responding to hidden than they are no mod. So they'll
Oh,
put on hidden with higher AR and they'll be like, oh wow, this is so much easier than if I just turned hidden off. Well, yeah, it's no wonder because you spent most of your time responding to that. It's the same thing. It's just a visual. You're more
right.
used to responding it. But yeah,
I
I hope
actually
that kind of debunks it in a sense that
right.
hidden is not easier on higher AR. It's a reasonable amount harder. Kind of varies depending on the map, but it is absolutely harder. It's way easier no mod if you have equal playtime on the two, reacting to both. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree that like if you are more comfortable reading like non-hidden, then like when you play higher AR, it'll be harder for you to turn on hidden because um there's that extra layer of like not being comfortable with the hidden mod in the first place. And um yeah, I do okay, I want to propose something and sort of see what you think about it. That
Yeah,
like
good.
the like rapid speed of approach circles closing in your peripheral adds like visual noise that takes your brain extra time to like um basically what's the word for like when you move your head, like your your brain like keeping the images of everything around you still, like even when there's things moving around you, you know what I mean? um Like
Um,
when you have the approach circles closing in rapidly around you, it takes like extra processing power for your brain to like keep the image on the screen still and like keep like still process where the circles are basically. Because I think the argument that a lot of people give when like with hidden and high AR is that it removes that visual noise of the approach circles. Like on lower AR, it's not so fast, so it's not really a big deal. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
okay. I'm going to ask you another question. Are you bothered by the fact that you see your nose at all times?
No, because
And
you don't
it's
notice it.
exactly.
It gets tuned
Um,
out.
I believe to some extent that exists for a lot of the noise. I'm sure you've seen a lot of older players' skins where they have a lot of crap absolutely
Oh yeah, yeah,
everywhere,
yeah.
but they're so used to seeing it that they kind of just filter it out. It's automatic. I don't think that noise actually bothers them. I think that when noise bothers people, it's just because they're typically not used to it being there. Um, for the most part, I don't think it's a problem. I think if you just turn off hidden and start playing high AR, um, it's you're just not used to seeing it. I think that's all it is.
Okay, that's actually fair. Yeah. So basically, like if you're used to non-hidden, then your brain's also like in that same vein. You're gonna be used to like that noise not really existing, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's it.
ignoring that
You
noise.
just filter it out.
Right, right. Okay, that is fair. Um, so yes, general consensus there. Hidden, not easier or harder necessarily. It's just a matter of which one you're already used to, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Um, okay. So another question that I want to bring up, and then I think we'll probably take viewer questions after that. There's a lot of questions on the forum about both gamma and refresh rate, monitor refresh rate, 144, 60, stuff like that. Overall thoughts? Do you think? Okay, so there's questions like, do you think 144 hertz monitor is necessary? So like there's a question, the anonymous question that asks, I've told, I've been told that people say you need 144 hertz or more for playing AR higher than 10.5. I'm wondering if it's really needed. Okay, yeah, I'm basically they're asking if they wonder if it's really needed or not.
Okay, so my answer to this is no. Does it help? Yes. So here's the thing: on 60 hertz, you're seeing a frame every. I think I have some of these memorized. I believe it was 16.7, 16.6 milliseconds, and for 144 hertz, you're seeing an object every, or a new frame every 6.9 milliseconds. So essentially, you're saving 10 milliseconds. Now the difference between AR 10.87 and 11 is 20 milliseconds. So the thing is, you're just losing 10 milliseconds. I think what's more detrimental when it comes to displays is the actual lag of the display, where it's like how some monitors are like 1 millisecond, 4 millisecond. A lot of these 60 hertz displays are over 10, and that combined can make it a tiny bit worse, where it's like you're losing 20 milliseconds, 25 milliseconds. Uh,
Right.
I I think when it's in the realm of 10 to 15, um, you're at like a disadvantage, but it's a kind of minuscule one. And especially if you get more used to the rhythms in the song, you're gonna have no problem at all. You'll be able to play it pretty well. I think that something that these monitors have more of a disadvantage on is stuff like alt maps. Like if you're gonna be Adam QS and wing my way 3 mod, you're not gonna be. I feel like you're not gonna be able to flow through this map as well with that kind of lag behind you. But like when you're just more like flowy things where you're kind of changing your angle very very frequently, and you constantly need to lag behind streams and stuff like that. Even hidden like lower AR hidden, I think all of these, it's more of a disadvantage than it is high AR.
Okay, okay. Sorry, my brain. I was like trying to. I said there's a question on the forum that I'm planning on asking as well. But yeah. So effectively, okay. So to summarize that as well. So 60 hertz does have slight disadvantages, but it's not like you can't overcome them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Okay.
not it's not the end of the world. You'll still be able to. I mean, something that anyone can look at is go watch FG Sky's Pillow live play, and then tell me that you suck at or that you can't play AR11 because of your fucking 60 hertz display. This dude is playing like one of the hardest maps in the game. Okay, that's not obviously the hardest map in the game. It was really
Right.
impressive. Flashlight, Air 11. He was going all the way across the screen on the highest approach rate, highest OD. He was doing it on a pillowcase, on a laptop, on I think he was like laying flat on his bed or the couch or something. Like what?
Like,
Sorry, dude. If you're gonna use the excuse that your display sucks and you can't play high AR because of it, you're just looking for excuses. That's all it is, in my opinion.
that's true. Actually, do you have any other thoughts that you want to expand on about like just making up excuses for yourself? I think especially with genetics being such a prevalent excuse in this community.
I used to think genetics was like a thing, and to some extent I do, very, very minimal. But no, I know a lot of people use that as an excuse now, and I tend to think that it's still something that can be out of your control. Not genetics, but rather I'll use my comparison to how I'm practicing streams on my left hand. One of the main reasons I'm practicing left hand is because I found it extraordinarily difficult to relearn my streaming technique on my left hand, the hand I tap with on my regular playing style. And I even designed gloves to like limit particular hand motions to try and kind of isolate certain motions to practice tapping in a certain way. And I could not learn the precise technique that I was looking for. So I started practicing with my left hand and tapping with my right, and it was so easy for me to just focus on particular motions that I wanted to learn. It was bliss. Like I could just practice it. I could rotate my forearm, incorporate that into my streaming motion. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I'm It's so easy for me to just focus on this because I'm not bound. I'm not restricted by this broken muscle memory that's so easy for me to resort to on my other hand when I'm trying to learn a new technique. Because it's like, here's the thing: your streaming technique is a combination of multiple motions and it differs from person to person. And when you're combining all these motions into one technique, and you're trying to stream, it's a very, very complicated to act, and it's like you're never just gonna magically incorporate one new thing in your technique because it changes everything. You're how do I put this? You'd have to relearn act from the start if you're going to use a brand new technique. If you're going to incorporate even a single new motion, whether it's rotating your forearm or moving your wrist in some peculiar way to go in sync with your streaming, you have to relearn act from the absolute beginning. So when you're trying to practice that while you're tapping, you're not gonna succeed. You're gonna fall back to your old technique. And that's why I designed various dumb gloves to try and prevent those motions. But it was just like it wouldn't work. So I swapped hands, and now it's just because I'm able to focus on these things from the start. It's very, very easy for me to just focus on them like that because I'm not falling back to my old technique constantly, and it's just pretty awesome.
Let's go.
Can you repeat that question so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can
On the
gather where
topic
I was
of
on that train
on
of
the
thought?
topic of genetics.
On topic of genetics, yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that when you're playing the game, you get kind of locked into these certain ways because they were just a habit from when you first started, and that you build that habit and it gets much stronger and stronger, and then you end up being this player who can't learn streams later on, and that sucks. You're like, damn, no matter what I do, I can't get good at streams. And you're right, you can't because you screwed up at the start. I'm sorry, you did. It's going to be very, very hard for you to change your technique. You can't figure it out, so you're like, damn it, this is out of my control. It's obviously genetics. There's nothing else, and that's kind of what goes on in their heads usually. And I understand that because I fell into that trap for a very long time. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out what my problem was. It had to be genes because there's nothing else. I was putting in the time, I was putting in the effort, and I wasn't getting better. And that's just what it was. So yeah, I don't believe the game is genes. I believe that you screwed up at the start, and that's why it's very, very hard for you to fix. I do think you can think about it and probably find different ways to, creatively surpass those. But yeah.
All right, I do want to add a bit of a sort of follow-up question because I suspect there might be at least one or two people that sort of listen to these interviews as a new player, and they really want to make sure that they are starting the game on the right foot so that they don't have any of those issues later on. Like, because what would you say is like a good way to like make sure that you're doing it the right way and that you're not going to have to relearn X aspect of the game later.
Okay, well, the thing is, when I'm playing this game, I obviously don't think you can reach an optimal point, but when I'm trying to play this game, I'm trying to reach something that's closer to optimal. So I can only kind of give things that I think are closer to optimal rather than what the absolute best is. It might come down to 30 years down the line, and the technique that I just told you is inferior to some guy, some new dude, the Zeltal 2 came up with. Um, but yeah, when it comes to higher AR and the topic of this video, I think it's kind of, let's see. Okay, I don't have a GN tier level reading, but I don't think it's as hard to rewrite the way you actually read the game than it is to rewrite your tapping technique entirely. And as I did say earlier on in this interview, I don't think it's detrimental to play higher early on, because I think that you're perfectly capable of relearning how to look at patterns, and it's not going to be as hard to rewrite as it is with tapping. Um, so yeah, when it comes to high AR in particular, uh, I don't know. I don't really think you can screw yourself up all that hard.
Okay, so there's some good news.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's something like high AR, it just comes down to exposing yourself to that speed over and over again, and like practicing processing at that speed until, yeah, I guess until you are more comfortable with it. I guess I'm not really sure what other way to put that. Um, but is anything else that you want to sort of expand on? I do want to make some time for viewer questions right now. Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and explain that, how that works now, and then Matrix, I'll ask you for a sort of summary slash like key takeaways. But yes, those of you guys who are listening live, if you join our Discord server, there's a text channel named Live Chat. You can drop your questions there. We'll take live questions for a little bit. And so how we do this is, if you see someone else's question that you would also want asked, if you could react to it with a thumbs up emoji, it would help us pick questions out and understand, which questions to answer. So yeah, so while questions are coming in, Matrix, do you have any key takeaways that you want to sort of summarize about like what we've talked about so far, like general advice for learning high AR?
Yeah. Most important thing in my opinion is, before you start it, I do think it's optimal to have a reasonable grasp on accuracy, because if you're not getting that comprehensible input when you're playing it, you're not going to be doing very well. You're not going to learn as fast as you would if were in this like kind of comprehensible input range. So yeah, we'll get maybe to some level slightly above OD10, and then your aim mechanics are already pretty good, and that'd be a really really good place to start practicing it. But you don't have to start there. Again, if it's more fun for you to just go all in, you are going to get better at high AR that way too. It just won't be nearly as efficient. Um, Other than that, let's see.
And you can expand on other thoughts as well as we get into other questions as well. So,
Yeah. Um,
okay. So first question that came in from live chat is from Joan, who asked, if you're learning a specific AR, do you think it's better to sight read a lot of maps at said AR, or try to memorize and FC a few maps? Basically, which one is better, since both would work? So yeah.
Okay, this is a good question. I think it's always better to sight read. I don't know if you guys are aware of this guy named Noodle Shredder, a friend of mine. We talked a lot about improvement. Uh, he also is on board of this kind of sight read approach where you always sight read maps. He's if you've ever checked no fail double time hard rock hidden leaderboards, you will probably see him on a good majority of maps with like 40%, because all he wants to do is sight read. He wants to sight read all the time. And I think that's a very, very good way to play the game. Constantly sight reading, you're getting better at just responding on like the first time. I mean, one thing you can compare this to is language. You're not going to practice the same sentence over and over again. You're going to practice, listening to a massive variety of sentences, and that gives you a lot more input.
And
You get a lot
flexibility
better
too,
at,
I'd say.
yeah, yeah. The rate of input is pretty important, I'd say. You'd probably improve the fastest if you worked on sight reading all the time. With that being said, there is absolutely merit to memorizing maps, and I'm saying this because There are very, very repetitive rhythms that are used in maps. Like when it comes to like double rhythms and etc. You can get very, very good at like kind of learning these particular patterns just by memorizing them in a couple of maps. Like if you memorize the rhythms in like 150 old maps and they're all really, really heavy rhythm wise, and then you start sight reading other maps, you might, let's say your sight readability isn't all that great. You'll see some of these rhythmic patterns, and I think this goes back kind of to the idea of like memory palaces, where you associate one concept with like a kind of a bigger chunk of a thing. I could be wrong on
Right.
memory palaces, kind of, but it's like you see that rhythm and you're like, oh, this is X rhythm that I've seen 100 fucking times. I can, you'll just remember it as that one object rather than like, oh, I have to press 1 2 break 1 2 and then triple and etc. You'll just kind of have this like template in your head of what the rhythm is like on the second try. You'll be like, okay, I know exactly what this is. I can just remember that in particular. So yeah, I do think that both memorization and sight reading have their merits to them. I think they're both important. Sight reading is a lot more important because eventually you will not need that memorization at all. I do think that it helps, but yeah.
Right. I sort of want to, in my head, I like relating it to like when you're learning a language, like memorizing idioms or like certain phrases that aren't necessarily what they literally mean. Or like it's a lot easier if you just memorize it as one thing or like one chunk. Um, or like you sort of know what I mean. Like multiple words that you'd rather just learn as one phrase.
Yeah.
And in that sense, like you don't read it triple as three individual notes, right? Um,
Yeah, obviously not.
and then to that extent, like if there's this repetitive pattern of like triple slider, triple slider, triple slider, um, sort of memorizing that as like one thing, and you sort of know how it goes, um, that can make things a lot smoother gameplay wise. Um, yeah, I think that sort of ties back to what you were saying. I do also want to clarify. I think about memory palaces. As far as I'm aware, that's more of like using your spatial memory to memorize things. I don't
Yeah,
think
I'm not super familiar. I just remember that like you have like these rooms and there's these objects and you tie them to certain concepts.
right,
Like there may be bigger concepts that it just helps you recall them easier. I've
right,
never
right.
tried to make one. I just think that I'm not trying to talk everything about memory palaces here, but
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I
All
that's
right.
just my vague idea of what it supposedly was.
Right. Okay. Next question. Okay. So this question is probably a faster one. I think we touched on it earlier, but from Kobo, is it possible to sight read comfortably with Air 11?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we probably covered that pretty well already.
Right.
But yeah,
Just wanted
absolutely.
to.
It's possible for
Right.
sure.
Okay. A question from DCS. Do you think that the type of map you practice on, you practice high AR on, like tech, farm, streams, etc., does that affect how effective? Yeah. Does that affect how effective the practice is?
I think a high diversity of input is good, but it also kind of depends what you want to get good at. Like if you spend all of your time practicing high AR alt maps, you'll get a lot better at memorizing those rhythms and getting used to sight reading those rhythms and all that good stuff. In short, just um, having like a huge diversity under your belt will always be a good thing, in my opinion.
Right. I think that there's like in the sense of well-roundedness, like we can like the one step past like being good at everything at AR11 is like being good at everything, right? Like AR11 is just kind of the speed at which it shows up, but there's still every single type of skill set existing under the
Yeah,
umbrella
if
of
you can play
AR11.
a skill on AR11, that means you're able to, execute that skill in less than 300 milliseconds. That means you're really good at that skill.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Um okay, next question from Mosin. Do you need warm up to play AR11? For example, if you take a break for a couple of weeks or simply waking up the next day. So like, do you, yeah, so do you need to warm up to play AR11 or can you just kind of play it
Uh,
at the
is
start of
this
a
like a
session?
personal question or like a general question? Because like
You can answer it both
depending
ways.
on depending on how good you are at the game, you can probably just log in and play AR11. I remember I spectated Zestiny once. He literally just logged in. And I was like, "Hey, dude, can you play Loudness War?" And he just FC'd the whole map first try. Just logged in. 300 BPM streams. He didn't need any warm up for that. He just did it. And that kind of goes the same for AR11 players. If you're just that good at AR11, yeah, you will absolutely be able to just log in and do that. Uh, can I do that? No. I definitely need some warm up before I'm at my peak ability or ability to play AR11. Some maps, if they're not too rhythmically challenging, maybe I can sight read them just from logging in. But nowadays I'm kind of rusted, so that's out of the question anyway.
Okay, so yes, agreed. By the way, you can definitely reach a certain point where you can do something without warm up, but it takes big skill, like big skill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, huge skill, man.
Yeah.
Gigantic, obese.
Obese. I saw your tweet about that. So I think GN. It was some screenshot with GN. Um, like what was it like when something good, like when
I
you think something is good,
I
you should just start calling it obese.
Yeah, and then I think he said something like, "That's an obese idea" or something. I
Right,
can't
right.
remember exactly. It was something like that, something in the realm of that. It was really funny though.
That's funny. Um, okay, next question from Lavova is: should you start using your peripheral vision for high AR? So I'm gonna kind of tweak this question, and I guess like in general, what are your thoughts on peripheral vision and reading high AR in particular?
There was a little bit of time where I changed the background to all of my maps to just be a gray background with a dot in the center, and I would just stare at that dot while playing. And I did that just to train my peripheral vision in specific. Uh, I found it made my eyes water a lot. I'm just throwing that out there. But I'm kind of the thing with peripheral vision is I think it's very, very useful to work on in practice. Uh, I think it's more relevant to cross-screen jumps than it actually is higher AR, but of course there can be cross-screen jumps in higher AR. Uh, and something I'd like to do was just to practice it. As I said, I'd have that dot on the screen, and when I'd play maps, I'd kind of progressively lower the CS because it's somewhat precision based. It's a lot easier to hit a CS4 circle in your peripheral vision than it is a CS8 one, obviously.
Right.
Um, yeah, I found it useful to practice that somewhat. Uh, how useful it is to AR11 in specific, kind of hard to tell you. Jumps, absolutely useful. They use their peripheral vision all the time. You're not moving your eyes to every single circle, usually. Maybe if you're nuts, I guess.
Um, okay, question about like Rafis's DT skin in particular, um, and its association with Gamma. Like does like okay, so is higher AR or okay, does Gamma have a better effect on certain skins than others? Basically, I think that's what the question is asking. A question from
Uh,
Snap.
no. I'd kind of argue Rafts' skin is one of the worst ones for AR11, but a lot of players would disagree with that because they're just more used to it. Something that's honestly always been kind of funny to me is Ruruchi's skin, because when you have the background completely gray, it's not kind of faded into the black anymore, so you see it almost instantly. Essentially, his skin was like gamma itself. His freedom dive score was essentially done on maximum gamma, which is something that's kind of hilarious to me. Uh, it's uh, I don't know how to put this. It's like Rafis' skin is very associated with high AR, and I think it's kind of just because Rafis was a good high AR player and he used it a lot, and a lot of people were motivated by him, and then they grew up in some sense, playing the game with his skin, and by the end of it, they're like, wow, this is awesome. I'm good at high AR on this skin. And I moved to another one, and it's like, damn, I can't play it on this, but I can play it on Rafis's. So Rafis's is the best for high AR. I don't think his is the best. As I had stated earlier, I think brighter colors are a lot better. You see them a lot easier, and also circles with the minimum transparency possible, uh, because you'll uh, when there's some transparency and then it fades in, you're losing even more time because it's partially transparent, and
Right.
yeah, generally I think the brighter colored skins are better. Not too bright; it can be kind of annoying and painful on the eyes. There's
Oh,
some kind of balance.
would you say that pure white is not a bright color? Just for the sake of argument, I'm asking.
Uh, for for I don't know what color it was that was supposedly the most noticed by the human eye. I think it was like bright green. In that regard, yeah, I'd say white is not the whitest color, even though it's a combination of all colors.
Right.
So, uh, oh, is it yellow? Yeah, Jaskin might be right. It's either yellow or green, one of the two. I think they're both very similar in the regard, but yellow is one of the easiest to catch, or green, one of those. And yeah, I think those would be kind of a closer to optimal color to actually use. I still don't actually think they're necessary. If you're just trying to go to like top tier optimization, yeah, go for it, dude. Make all your fucking circles bright yellow.
Um, okay, but by the way, I do also want to shout out that we are also interviewing Rafis this week for High AR, so we can probably talk a lot about, or at least a little bit. I'm definitely going to ask him about his skin because it's gotten so popular as in association with High AR. So, yeah, but
Yeah, and I mean, I'm open to criticism about that as well. Like,
right.
if someone comes to some train of logic that kind of proves to me that, like, hey, this skin is actually really easy to notice, and like there's something about it that actually makes you respond to it a little sooner, I'd like to hear that, because I'm interested in learning more about this stuff myself.
Right. I also want to ask. Okay. So actually, because I don't know why I worded it that way. This is next viewer question. From Tudis, who asks, many people read quints/triples by quote unquote counting the notes. Does this habit make it harder for learning higher AR?
Okay, see, I don't know anyone who actually does that at higher level play. Like, you would not be able to do that. You just can't focus on it like that, I think.
Yeah.
I've never done that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're playing really low BPM and you're kind of trying to get a hang on control, maybe you're still doing that. But if you're still at that level, you probably should not be thinking about AR11 yet, or higher AR.
Yeah, I think that sort of goes back to what I was saying. Like you don't really read like triples as three individual notes typically. If you're just getting started, then you kind of have to like make the association that like you see three notes like that and you associate it with tapping three times and maybe like solidify the motion of your hand that's comfortable for you for tapping a triple. But once you make that fundamental association, you just see those three notes and you're like, okay, yes, triple, and then you sort of execute that tapping motion that you've practiced of like how to tap a triple. But yeah, general consensus is okay. So, like, if the habit was something that people did, it probably wouldn't help. Is that, or it would probably make it harder? Do you think? 'Cause the question is like, if you did have the habit of
Well,
counting the
okay, if
notes,
you were doing that on high AR, I think it'd be straight up impossible. Like, you do not have the time to like count in your head at 300 milliseconds. You just don't. Uh,
so
I,
you just sort of have
I
to
did.
see the. You just have to
You have to have that
recognize.
intuition. You have to know. You have to be able to read properly without kind of relying on that kind of counting
Right.
type of thing.
And
Like, I
that
haven't even like thought of that in a long time. I'm kind of remembering when I was a newer player, I might have done something like that when I was learning control on really low BPMs. But this was like 7 years ago.
right. So yeah, general consensus is you sort of need to be able to see or like know. It's one of those fundamental things that you sort of need to have down before you get into high AR, I guess. As
Uh,
as sort of what we were talking about towards the beginning.
yeah, you have to be able to do the control in a map without thinking about it. It has to be like an automatic process for you. You can't be counting in your head.
What is this question from are you DJ? Don't know how to pronounce that. Does AR11 only work on 5 plus stars, or should I learn AR11 on 3 stars first, then AR8 on 6 stars? Okay, do you want to try psychoanalyzing this question?
See, I think he's inexperienced, which is why he's asking this question. But there are some circumstances where I thought playing on lower AR was, or lower star rating, was kind of cool. Like, typically because the BPM is so low. Like, going back to that whole 1/4 thing, how we don't treat an object, um, that we don't treat it as a stream until we see the second note. When you're playing 150 BPM, you have to wait a lot longer than 200 BPM or 270 BPM. So in a
Maybe.
sense, it's even harder to react. there were some 150 BPM maps that I used to play a lot. Now, to the point of I'd eventually memorize them, but it's like it was a lot harder to react to because the BPM was lower. Lower BPM is absolutely harder to react to on higher AR.
Right. You effectively, you really do only see one note at a time on lower BPMs, the higher AR. Right?
Yeah, I think once you get to the lower BPMs and you're seeing one note at a time, then you're probably good enough to just single tap it, which would evade that completely.
That's
But let's
true.
just say on the premise where you're still treating it as a stream, it's harder to react to.
Yeah.
So yeah, where I'm going with this is like, I mean, it's good to practice in some ways, but uh, generally speaking, no, I don't think you should really care about it on 4 to 5 stars. I mean, there's some 5 stars that are kind of cool, but like 4 stars, I don't know, man. If you just want to get like a number 1 on an insane diff or a hard diff, go for it. But yeah, for getting really really good at it, no.
All right. I think that mostly covers the questions that I think I've seen so far for this interview. Keep in mind that you're coming back on Friday, right? There's going to be a Q&A panel.
I might come back on Friday. I can't guarantee
Okay.
it yet.
Right. But even regardless, I think you're pretty responsive about, you're very open to discussion on these things, even outside of this interview. So could you give a bit of a shout? Where can people find you? Any plug? This is your cue to plug everything. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So I guess if you want to, my DMs on Twitter, I usually respond to DMs on Twitter. At Dream Emulation, no spaces, no space, of course, but no underscore or anything like that. Just both of those words together. My YouTube channel, just look up Matrix Osu. If you comment, I'll usually reply if it's a question. I don't really answer on Discord. You could also probably just message me in game, and I'll probably check it.
Right.
Yeah.
I assume people can find your socials and your OC user page, probably.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is just Matrix.
Yeah. Just username's just Matrix.
Let's go.
Otherwise known as Heaven Punisher with a space.
Like from what I recall, you kind of you change your Twitter handle every now and then, or have you stopped doing that for the most part?
I haven't felt like it in a while. I probably won't for a long time. No guarantee. I kind of like this one because I really like LSD Dream Emulator, the game.
Oh,
I
I
do
see.
drugs. The game's cool.
Let's go. Yes, sounds good. Thanks again for joining Matrix, and thanks to everyone who stopped by live, or if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify. Yes, okay, places you can find OC University. So join our Discord server if you want to get directly involved. It is absolutely the best thing you can do. You can stay up to date with announcements and ask questions live during these interviews, all that good stuff. So yes, join our Discord server. But the best way you can support this content is definitely just to spread the word, share it with anyone you think might appreciate it. Probably the YouTube channel, subscribe, stuff like that. Stay notified. Honestly, we also have a Twitter account, twitter.com/OCUniversity. Lots of good stuff. And yes, Spotify as well. There's also a Spotify channel. Those of you guys who are listening on Spotify, you guys are awesome. Join our Discord server. That's I think the general the key takeaway from all of this. But yeah, thank you again, Matrix, for joining us. Do you have any last words as we wrap up?
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Anytime you want to talk about improvement and stuff, I'm down. I'm always interested in ways of getting better at various skills, and I like talking about it. I don't do it as much as I used to because I've fallen off the whole competitive thinking of the game, but I still like to think about it sometimes. I guess I'll give a nice little shout out to the Kush Van Man and Unco, and yeah, that's it. But yeah,
let's go.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, so something that we do at OC University as well is sort of like one-off interviews / like discussions, which are called lecture halls. Basically, is answering a question like in the same sort of format. So yeah, I look forward to that. We might see you on some of those as well. But yeah, with that, that's going to wrap up this interview. Stay tuned for the next interview tomorrow, which is going to be with I'm a Fancy Lad. But yeah, with that, we'll see you guys next time.
Yep. See you guys.